Hi there. So this week I had the opportunity to record my good friend David Goodstein for my friend Paul Peterson's Funk Friday number 83 episode. If you aren't following Paul, you should definitely check it out every week. He does a cover and has a lot of amazing musicians on it. And this week he did a cover of Let's Dance, and he asked David to play drums on it, and I recorded it, and I actually wound up getting asked to mix it. And what happened was I listened to the original record, and which was done by my hero Bob Clearmountain, and wanted to approximate those drum sounds. I heard a couple things. I picked a snare that I thought was going to work the best for that. I don't know what was used on the original record, but I picked my Valley Custom snare and made sure that David Center hit it. The other thing that I heard was Bob's sample, which was on all his hit records in the 80s, and I also heard what sounded to me like the AMS nonlinear reverb from the RMX 16. And let's take a look at that. I'm gonna play down the mix for you real quick, and then we'll get to how we heard that. So there you have it. I think we're pretty damn close on that. And let's take a look at what we did there. So I was sent some stems. Oliver Lieber, another close friend of mine, played the rhythm guitar on that. This is interesting. We'll start with this, which is actually simpler than people think it is, because there's a complicated delay on it. And here's the guitar part. And apparently that's the way it was tracked. And upon mixing, what Bob Clearmountain did was he put two delays on it. One is a 16th and, one is an eighth and one is a quarter note. And here's the quarter note. And then here's the eighth to add along to it. One of the reasons why Bob's my hero. That's a very genius move. It's a very musical move as a mixer to do something. It makes it extra funky. And other than that, let's see, what do we do on that? As you guys who ever watch me know, I work a lot with Universal Audio. I'm one of their artists, and you'll see that I have plug-in presets in a lot of the plugins. I did something that I usually do on electric guitars, which is I put the Studer 800, I use the Helios, I have a setting in there called Keef Riff Hard, which is a really good electric guitar setting, and then I put some LA2A on it. And as opposed to, this is how it was without it. I'm just adding some presence, a little bit of compression. So we had that. That got us in the ballpark, what was there. And I want to thank Ollie for letting me know the research on the delay. The next thing was Paul did the horns, and he did synth horns, and he asked me, hey, I printed gated reverb on that. Do you want me to send you a dry one? And I said, absolutely not, because that is the sound that I want anyway. So you did it for me. And it goes like this. And it's perfect. I wound up putting a little bit of 3K and 8K just to brighten it up a little bit. What else did he get me there? He gave me a pad towards the end, did the same thing. He sent me a choir. It was a placeholder for the Oz, which I wound up using a little bit of, which was the... And it's just a stack that keeps developing. It starts with the tonic, major third, the fifth, and then the dominant seven. It makes a dominant seven chord. That's what that harmony thing is. David and I stacked some harmonies, and Lenny did one too. Lenny Castro, who is playing percussion on this. Lenny, and then what I did was I wound up doing a few things. I ran it through the 1084, did a bunch of high pass, added a bunch of highs and mids, did my, I did a squish thing on the... Wound up using the Eventide 3000, the doubler. And I've been using that for years in the analog realm. And I love that. I just love the way that this thing does a nice... Thinkens it up, spreads it out. Did a little blend there. And I wound up, when I was mixing, I threw the SSL on again just to give it a little more EQ. So we have that. Which brings us to the drums. That's the fun part. So I'm going to start with the kick. And let's mute the AMS for now. So D12, that's what it's doing. I decided it needed a little more mid smack. I usually take 1K out. I'm adding it in this time. Putting 1176 on it. I like the Ed Cherney kick drum thwacker. I miss Ed. He was brilliant. You can hear it without the EQ. It just needed that thing, especially when I add the outside mic in. There's reverb on the record on the kick, which is unusual. So let's bring that back in so you can hear. This is the AMS RMX16. Again, UA plugin. I have a nonlinear reverb. It's the sound of the 80s. That's just what the 80s sound like. This is on everything. And that's what gives it that sort of tight, confined, claustrophobic space. It also puts a lot of harmonic element in it. It really fattens things up. So we needed to do that with the snare as well. Here's the snare by itself. I wound up putting a lot of top on it. I just needed it for this thing because the way I'm going to blend it. I have a gate going. I have drum leveler. Because when I add the trigger, which is slate trigger, and I am using the Clear Mountain triggers that came out years ago. I have whatever that sound is that was on, Heart of Rock and Roll and Summer of '69 and all that stuff, and this. So I threw that in there, and I really had to brighten it up a lot and compress it to get that sound. So it's where it sounds like the record. There's not a lot of low end in the record. It was vinyl days, but put the AMS back on it. And you can see I'm I'm automating the snare on that intro so that it has some dynamic commensurate with the live one. Not a really pretty sound, but it's the sound of the 80s. That's what people were into at the time. It really drives everything. And then I did a little crotch mic. I put a 4038 in, compressed the crap out of it, and put it down near the snare. And that's just slightly blended in, and that's helping out with the overall snare sound along with the overheads. It just gives it a little bit of life and dimension, a little bit of thickness that we lose by the way we're EQing everything. And again, those snare sounds on themselves don't sound that great. Probably a sound I would never use. I am mixing while I'm listening to everything. I'm not mixing things in solo. I'm listening in context and going, snare needs to be brighter. So I brighten things up. When I solo it, it sounds like crap. But when everything's together, it's the sound I want. So that's how you should be judging things, not everything by itself. You want to listen to things in context. And this was a quick 10-minute mix. I'm taking longer to explain this thing than it took me to do the thing. I just sort of listened, heard what I wanted, threw it in. I did not, for this, I did not do a drum bus like I usually do. I just threw things up. I'm like, oh, the sound's there. So that left me with a couple things. First off, I did Lenny's conga. I did some compression, a little bit of EQ, but on the wood block, what I did was, because here's the wood block. We'll get to it. Here it is. There's like a bunch of reverb on the record on that. And I used what's kind of my favorite reverb is the Capital Chamber. I do a little pre-emphasis EQ going in. You can see. That's where I'm at on that guy. And I think I'm using the Al Schmidt setting with a little bit more pre-delay. What do we get when we add that? There's some snare going in there too, you can tell. That should not be in pre. And that just makes it sit a lot better as opposed to if I mute that verb. And there's that, it's kind of haunting, and that's how it is on the record. Again, another genius call by Bob. And a lot of things is, I don't know exactly how he did a lot of the stuff, and that's not important. I have a general idea of how he did things, but when I'm trying to recreate something, it's never as important for me to use the exact same methods as someone else used if I can get to the result. Because I don't have a lot of the tools available that Bob had, and it's a completely different ballgame now anyway. So the important thing really is, with whatever tools you have available when you're working, if you're hearing a record and you want a particular sound, you have to know how to get to that result. So when I'm making a record and someone goes, oh, I want this sound or that sound, you just have to go to battle with the army you have and have a general idea of how to get there. Last thing is the solo, I believe it's Randy Jacobs. And I had a fairly direct sounding, let's see, where are we at? Oops. Here's the solo. Sounds like Mike right on the cabinet, hair of delay. Well, Stevie Ray Vaughan's solo on Let's Dance sounds like it's in the room. It's got a lot of room sound. I also thought that actually sounds better for this context. And we have a really wonderful tool these days for that. It's the Ocean Way Room. And I grabbed the Cabinet M in the Ocean Way A. It's, again, another great universal audio tool. And I wound up putting a pair of U67s in Omni, and I played with the distance till I found one that sounded right to me. And I wound up doing a blend of dry and wet. And it went from this to this. Which sat immediately in the mix more to me like the Stevie Ray. I again did my Helios and Teletronics, and I wound up adding a little more echo to it with their EP34 and gave it some capital too. So we'll take out the Ocean Way, let you hear the difference. It's just the ambient miking just has a different feeling, a different emotion to it. That was the right call when it was done, honestly. So that's how we recreated that. And I think we got pretty damn close. Like I said, it was a 10-minute mix. I really could have tweaked on it more and gotten, and split a bunch of hairs. And for me, the important thing were what were the elements that stand out, that make that track sound the way they do. Kick and snare sound, the AMS nonlinear around it. And I don't know if Bob used the nonlinear or not, but it could have just been a gated reverb, but that's what it sounded like to me, and that's what gave me that feeling. The reverb on the woodblock was a huge aspect. That the delay on the guitars, or the delay on the rhythm guitar, that gated reverb on the horns with the right synth sound there for that. The room sound on the solo. And one other thing, it's a regular bass on the record. Paul decided to play keyboard bass on this. And we'll just touch on this real quick. This was one last thing I did. And come out of group. So there was a lot of ploingy envelope sound, which is funky, but it was sticking out a little too much with that. So it sounded too much like a Cameo record and not like a Nile Rodgers production. So I brought on my friend, the API 560, which I just mellowed out some of that spring, and I wanted a little more thickness in the low end, so I brought on our friend, the Little Labs Voice of God, which is a harmonic generator. And it thickened up the low end where I wanted it. And I did another thing, which is sort of a takeoff of another. It's not a Bob thing, but I put there's a setting that I've come up with in the Valhalla Space Modulator, which is a nice little thing, which is a takeoff of the SPX 90 symphonic, basically chorus, and I just have a touch of that on bass just to make it a little more 80s, a little bit of bass chorus. Just helps widen it out a little bit without giving it too much swish. And I would play you the real thing next to this, but then it would get pulled from YouTube or from Instagram we're on. So we'll listen down one more time and you can decide how much like the real record it is. All right, I hope that was fun and informative. Keep everything in phase, and I like doing it this way. It sounds better than when I usually just point the camera and the mic has to capture the speaker, so maybe I'll start doing things this way from now on.